I've recently, so I'm not the one to believe in like the woo woo and like the spiritual and like, manifestation and all that.
Crystals and
crystals and horoscopes and all that nonsense. But one thing I have been really enjoying recently is I don't know what to call it. I guess you would call it manifestation. But it's also, there's psychological science behind it. So, I write down in my notes app what I want. And I get real specific with what I want, like the kind of house, like the kind of relationship, like the kind of business, or like the kind of, everything from like the kind of wheelchair that I want or the kind of like products or services or whatever. I get real specific with it. And then I also like keep that on the front of my mind. I say it out loud. I'd be like, or talk to people about it, and then
I'd say that's manifestation.
Yeah, and then what inevitably what happens is because my brain knows that I'm looking for it, my brain starts seeing opportunity in places that it never saw opportunities before, and connections. Excuse me.
You're not excused.
That it may have never seen before. And that's something called the R.A.S, the reticular activating system. So the R.A.S is a pattern recognition system that's in our brain. And it was originally evolved as a way to protect us, to alert us. Like when we were like cavemen, when we would walk to one particular field that we would always go walk to hunt, if something on the path was different or if there was a different sound or a different noise, it would alert us, bling, and we'd go, oh, God, what's different about this? But the best example I have is like if you've ever owned a car, like when you're shopping for a car and you're like, ooh, I want that car. I've never seen any one of those drive around on the road before, and then as soon as you buy one, you see them everywhere. Or you buy a new shirt, you're at the store, and you're like, oh, that shirt's cool, dude. I've never seen anyone wear that shirt before. And then you buy it, and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. That same psychological hack can work in your mind because, like, I'm dead set, for example, on, a wheels to walking wheelchair. Like that's gonna happen. Like I refuse to stop until I get a wheels to walking wheelchair, and it's gonna be a dope wheelchair, and it's gonna be wheelchair for everyone, but not just for me, and it's gonna be awesome. And I also have that same mindset towards like, eventually maybe an adaptive clothing line or like my own bags or my own catheters or my own wheels or my own accessories or whatever. But that's just in the professional world. But whatever I kind of like say I want. And then
Sick, just spilled water on myself.
Like write down what I want and say what I want. It gives me the opportunities to then see those things that I would have never seen before.
I agree. I definitely agree with you. And I think also
it's not just praying and wishing and waiting. You have to take actual action, but it's just a way to
there's
kind of let your brain know, be like, hey brain, I'm looking for this.
There's like a saying that's like God helps those who help themselves. It's like you gotta you can pray and wish and hope all you want, but you gotta like actually do something about it. And I think like for example, one thing that is like a real life example for me is like when I started my podcast back in the day. It was like me taking the first steps of doing something. People are like stoked to jump on to the train that's already moving. Like, I think we've talked about the example before.
No one wants to start their own thing. They want to wait till they see someone around them start something and then jump on board.
Yeah.
They want to hook onto that train and be like, let's fucking, come on, let's do big stuff, bro. And it's like,
because they've already done all the hard work,
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's also like, for example, that guy, Charlie Rocket, like we talked about him before on the podcast, I think. And he was one of those guys that he had already done a lot of cool things in his career, but then he took a big shift and he was just really, I'm on a winning streak, and he was trying to get on every podcast and do all these things. And he was just setting his intentions very publicly. And because he was doing that, it kind of made him look like a little bit of a jackass, but like people were hyped to like jump on because they could see the real passion that he had for things. And I think that's like what happens with Wheels to Walking. That's what happened with my podcast. That's what happens with any kind of project is like, you've got to put yourself out there and do something. And obviously it has to be some level of good. Like it has to be decent.
It has to be somewhat proven.
Yeah, but
the person has to have some type of track record.
Kind of, but not necessarily really. Like you just have to like go out there and people are psyched, whatever you want to say. They're stoked to support you. Because we've brought up this example before on the podcast. Like if you're on the side of the road and you're, waving down people trying to get them to help you push your car or whatever, no one's going to stop. But if you're sitting there pushing the car by yourself, people are going to go, oh my gosh, that guy needs help. Like if you're already trying to do it, people are going to stop and help you try to push your car.
Yeah.
And, maybe you'll get a few people. But if you're just
up your hood and you wave, like,
hey,
someone stop and help me. No one's gonna. But if you start pushing your own car, even if you have nowhere to go, people will pull over and be like, why are you pushing all by yourself? Like, let's go.
Exactly. So it's that same kind of mindset where if you start something, people are more likely to jump on. But in the same sense of like attracting certain things, I think, even you just like talking about it on the podcast, people are like, oh, Richard really wants to have this wheels to walking wheelchair. Like, oh, that's cool. Like, maybe we haven't brought that up as many times, or maybe that's the first time someone's heard that or whatever. And so the more and more people hear it, the more they're looking for those opportunities too. Like you said, with like pattern recognition and things like that, you start to realize things that you didn't realize before, and things like that.
It's just a vision, man. Like I am a person who likes clarity and order and organization and planning and vision, because that's just like what's required of me as a disabled person. I think, when someone actually messaged me today and like, hey, I'm writing a paper for high school or something, and she was like, you talk a lot about how disabled people are good in the workforce. Like, what are some examples of what you like would make us good in the workforce? And those things, it's about planning, it's about organization, it's about effective systems, it's about communication, empathy. Like there's a lot of like really cool things that we just have to do on our own anyway. We have to figure out on our own anyway. But I don't know where I was going with this, but the idea of
no, it makes sense. And like, you were kind of talking about writing down goals and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, thank you.
And how like having like a poverty versus like abundance mindset and things like that.
R.A.S.
Yeah, and the R.A.S. One thing that reminded me of the R.A.S. recently that I was listening to, I can't remember what podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about, I think it was on Rogan. They were talking about why when people puke, other people start puking around them. Like, how you get that weird...
It's the same thing with yawning. It's like the reason why yawning is contagious is the same psychology as why puking is contagious.
Well, they were saying with puking, the reason why is like if you see someone puking, you have the urge to puke because like in that, caveman times or whatever, when we evolved this thing, it was because like probably if someone around you had eaten something bad, you also had eaten that bad thing, so you needed to puke. What would the yawning correlation be?
Similar thing. So yawning is when your brain is oxygen deprived and it like needs a boost of oxygen. But
oh, really?
The psychology behind it, I think, has to do with like something. It's very reptilian. It's like core. It has to do with like drowning. Like if you see someone take a huge breath, your brain goes, oh shit, maybe there's not going to be air in a few minutes. Like I need to take a huge breath too. So you just yawn. Like your yawn is a very like huge inhale. It's a refresh oxygenation of your brain. So when you
but a yawn is an exhale. It's like,
I mean, I would say my yawns are inhale. Maybe
it'd be like,
oh yeah, you're right. It is an inhale.
Yeah, it's
like
it's a little bit of both. Yeah,
yeah. You do the exhale afterwards.
Yeah, so
everyone's in their cars yawning.
Yeah, it's this big like boost of it's a protective thing. It's amazing what the human brain is. Like I feel like being a human isn't as complicated as people think once you figure out like the things you do that are out of your control that like evolution has programmed you to do.
Yeah, well there's two things, right? There's like the monkey mind or the reptilian mind or whatever you want to call it. And then there's this layer of like intelligence on top, and that's what separates us from the animals, Cuz like there's certain
self-awareness and awareness of death is like the two.
Self-awareness, awareness of death. I feel like animals probably know they're going to die though. I think certain ones.
I think that is the biggest defining feature between humans and animals is that we are aware of our own mortality, so therefore we take more protections to live longer. Like we're more like no other species lives like we do because they don't know that they're gonna die. They don't know about death.
I
Yeah.
heard something that dolphins have the same like psychology and like social interactions as like humans.
Could
do.
be. Dolphins are extremely intelligent. Like I often think, I mean, if you think about like we were these weird fish that turned into weird lizards that turned into marsupials that turned into like tree swamp rats that turned into monkeys that turned into humans. So it's like in another cycle of evolution, like
we could have been dolphins or whatever.
No, I'm like the dinosaur turned into the chicken. You know what I mean? Like what could potentially we evolve or devolve into as a Homo sapien, but also what other creatures and species, like maybe like a squirrel, you know, or like pigeons. Maybe squirrels and pigeons are like the new thing in the next, 500 million years or some shit like that.
Yeah, but the thing about dolphins that's interesting is there are a lot of like proven things, like they're one of the few animals that has sex for pleasure. Like they play with, like they make their own toys. Like
yeah,
that's
they're super social
like they can
creatures.
blow circular bubbles and like swim through them and like play with the bubbles. And the other crazy thing about dolphins is their ability to communicate like super long distances and
using frequencies that we can't even hear.
yeah, and
Sound waves and shit.
they can manipulate 3D space just like a bird. Like if you think about it, they are basically flying in their own universe.
Yeah,
Because if you really
true.
think about it, water and air are on opposite sides of the spectrum. Like we can't survive in the water, they can't survive in the air.
In the same way that we like dive into the water and come back up, they dive into the air and go back down.
Exactly. So it's like really crazy to think about how they can
Reverse world.
literally like they are. Their sky is our water, and our water is their sky.
It'll be nice to see if the dolphins. So again, another thing that makes humans is our dexterity, our hands, and then because we have the ability,
so we can manipulate our environment.
Well, it first started with us making tools, and then it started with our ability to use our hands, and then we could start like observing our environment, and then we went from quadrupedal to bipedal, and then we started using tools to manipulate our environment. So consciousness kind of grew at the same time. We stopped requiring the use of our hands, and then we started building tools to manipulate the world around us. And it's like dolphins don't have hands or the ability to manipulate the world around them, but a lot of people argue that like dolphins are way more intelligent than humans. They just don't have the tools to manipulate their environment.
And we value certain things. Like we value certain aspects of our reality that like animals don't necessarily value. So we view ourselves as being like more intelligent because we value whatever. But it's like that's only true because of how our brains are wired. And it's super weird to think about the fact that like, I mean, this is even trippier to think about, but just the idea that your perception of everything is just what your brain is like telling it. And the fact that since we're all humans, our brains are all kind of telling us similar things, or so we think. But like, I don't really know that table is there except for the fact that my eyes are seeing reflections of light that are coming back. But there's so many other different wavelengths of things.
You could touch it,
Yeah.
There's
But it's weird to think like your eyes are just sensing wavelengths of things. And there's other wavelengths of things that are happening all around us, that our human bodies have not evolved to be able to sense.
microwave, infrared.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about like 5G and all this stuff that people are worried about, because like once you get up to a certain amount of because it's all like frequencies, right? The smaller and smaller you go, eventually you'll reach microwaves, which I mean you can't use microwaves to send stuff because it would literally be dangerous. You'd be getting into radiation and shit.
Well, I think 5G is in the double-digit hertz, and microwaves are in like the hundreds of thousands of hertz. Like it's like
I don't really know.
It's very,
but like there
very
would
different.
be, if we keep using that same technology to potentially get faster and better and more information per
over
wave or whatever,
decades and centuries, probably. Yeah,
we
start
couldn't
cooking ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And people are all worried about it. But you think about
people
it.
People worry
like,
about electricity.
Yeah, but
what I mean?
that
like
it's a weird thing to think about
everything.
because like heat sensing cameras are real because heat is like a frequency, right?
Yeah.
But like our brains don't have that sense. Like our eyes can't sense that wavelength, but we sense light or whatever. You know, like it's such a weird thing. And then, dude,
perception is reality, but it's your personal perception. It's so weird.
Yeah, apparently Elon. There was an article I saw recently that said he's doing a Neuralink demo this week.
Not happening. No way.
I don't know.
If he does do it, it's going to be just as of a shit show as the Cybertruck. Like whatever he releases and demonstrates is going to be compared to what actually comes out.
I mean, do you think the Cybertruck's going to be shit compared to what they showed on the stage?
It has to, due to a lot of like regulations with like how it's built.
It has to be smaller.
Yeah,
it definitely won't be bulletproof glass too.
Like there's a lot of it didn't have mirrors. Like the angle of the front was too aggressive.
In Europe, you're allowed to not have mirrors.
Oh, cool.
You're allowed to have cameras.
Neat.
Yeah,
I want that. I just think it'll turn out the same way.
There's a Honda car that's really dope.
Way that the Supra turned out. Like what we got versus what was delivered. Granted, what was delivered has grown on me, but the concept that we saw was like, ooh, I want that bad. And the one that was delivered, we were like,
but that's Toyota. I mean, like,
but they had to concept to reality is always very, very, very different.
Oh yeah, for sure. I know. I'm just saying that they're doing a Neuralink demo this week.
I'd like to see what happens.
Yeah, I think from the pictures that I saw, it's like it's not implanted in their skin yet. It's like a thing that like sits behind your ear or something. Yeah. That was another moment where we talked in unison.
Dude, remember
last week when we did that?
We're synced up.
Last week I also realized that we did that because we were reading the same message.
Yes.
But it was still really funny.
Hope you enjoyed that clip. If you'd like to see the full episode, click right here. If you'd like to subscribe, click here. If you'd like more clips, we got 2 more right over here.